What's a little dog?
Strings band.
Right. Because that's quite young, isn't it?
We know, like,
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the planning meeting of the State Planning Committee. We are expecting a fire drill today. In the event of the alarm sounding, please leave the building and gather at the front. I am obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Could I also ask you please to ensure mobile phones are switched off in order to let those watching the live stream know who is speaking? Could members and officers introduce themselves prior to speaking? To ensure that members of this committee and all points raised by public speakers are properly heard, I must advise you I will not tolerate any disruptive behaviour. This is a meeting held in public and not a public meeting. And if such behaviour takes place and persists, I will adjourn the meeting. I shall now ask members of the committee and officers to introduce themselves. Carolyn.
Councillor Julia Buckley, Bridge North Western Tasley.
Councillor Richard Marshall Worfield.
Councillor Tony Parsons, Basin Hill, Column and Sock.
Councillor Hilary Luff, Church Stretton and Craven Arms.
Councillor Nigel Harkin, Planning Division.
Robert Tindall, I represent Brown Cleeve Division.
Andy Boddington, Ludlow North.
Jeff Elmer, Councillor Jeff Elmer, covering for Nick Heiner, who cannot be here with us today.
Thank you.
Councillor Nigel Lumby from Brighton.
Thank you. I'm David Evans. I'm Councillor for Church Stretton and Craven Arms and also chair of this committee.
Andrew Iqbal, Solicitor.
Tim Rogers, Interim Planning Services Manager.
Graham French, Principal Planner.
Thank you. We've had apologies from absence from Caroline Wagner, and Julie Buckley is substituting. We've also had apology for absence from Nick Hignett and Jeff Elder is substituting. Are there any public questions, please?
No public questions.
No public questions, right, thank you. Minutes of the meeting, held on March the 8th. Could I have a proposal for the minutes, please? Thank you. Second for that. All in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous, except for the two that substitute.
I abstain because I wasn't present.
Okay, thank you. Disclosure of pecuniary interest, please. No? Okay. Right, we move on to Kenwood, Sycamore Road, Roseley. Ren, please.
Wrong one. Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, if I ask for the slides to be advanced when ready, could I have the next slide, please? So, this application is for demolition of an existing dwelling and erection of a replacement dwelling at Kenwood, Sycamore Road, Roseley. Members will have visited the site this morning. So the existing property was seen as a 1950s construction, simple rectangular form. I think it's fair to say it's looking a bit tired. Within a footprint of approximately 90 square metres, located in the eastern part of the site, which is sort of generally lower. It's on a sloping site, as you would have seen. And the site is north of Roseley town centre and is accessed by a minor road from the B4375, which is the main road running through Roseley. So the application is a resubmission of a previous application refused in August last year on conservation and amenity grounds. The 4-bedroom dwelling now proposed, if we could have the next slide please, and the next slide after. And again, please, just thank you. It contains a number of improvements and amendments relative to the previously refused scheme. The rectangular in form with a footprint of 121 square metres, which is smaller than the previous scheme. We have 2 floors, but say the first floor accommodation is largely within the roof space. I know from most angles it look a bit like a bungalow because you've got roof lights rather than windows on the roof space. So there's front and rear eaves gable, southwest facing side gable formed by the dual pitched roof. Be constructed over the footprint of the existing dwelling and approximately 2 metres further forward to the northwest and 1.5 metres to the northeast within the plots, which is a slight improvement, taking it sort of slightly further away from the public elevation of Sycamore Road. So material would be Broseley brick plinth, which you can assume a sort of reddish heritage brick, with render walls above, eaves detailing, and aluminium framed windows rather than the UPVC, and a red clay tile roof. The existing access would be increased in size to provide a turning area, and parking would be increased from the current 1 space to 3 spaces. Amendments during the application reduce larger areas of ground floor glazing, so you're narrowing the width of windows for the doors and the patio areas, and change their emphasis from horizontal to vertical, which is more in keeping with the local vernacular. The first floor glazing is removed within the front gable, and side glazing is reduced and repositioned into the apex, if you just see on the bottom right slide there. There's been an increase in width, very marginal, and an ensuite has been accommodated in the first floor. So Broseley Town Council has objected, stating the revised scheme fails to address the previous refusal reasons and that it doesn't represent an innovative high quality approach as required by the Broseley Town Plan. The 2-storey building replaces a bungalow, so there's more that's being proposed. It's an elevated location, will affect privacy and has the potential to reduce daylight to one property. Stability and drainage and construction and access issues should be addressed now rather than left for conditioning that the Town Council says. 14 different households have also objected to proposals on similar grounds, including proximity, loss of privacy, scale, unsympathetic design, construction disturbance, stability, drainage, and the original refusal reasons have not been addressed. However, other planning consultees have not objected. Significantly, conservation are satisfied with the revised drawings, and highways are satisfied that access and parking issues have now been adequately addressed. You'll note the Coal Authority has recommended a ground investigation condition, and that's included in the schedule of conditions recommended. So from an officer perspective, the site is located in the key centre of Broseley, and as such the principle of a replacement dwelling can be accepted. In this case, the scale and position of the dwelling within its plot has been improved, so it relates better to the existing layout and achieves satisfactory separation distances. Location and size of the openings now proposed is considered to minimise any adverse impact from overlooking or shading. And if we could have the next slide, we can see the sections there. So you see the difference in ground levels between the nearest adjoining property, and you'll see that there is a sort of set down and a retaining wall and fencing, so that the actual ground floor window where the principal sort of overlooking could potentially occur is fully enclosed from that perspective by the boundary treatment. If I have the next slide, I think there's a couple more. Yes, so we're just looking at the ground and upper floor there, and I think there may be another slide. That's it. So if we could go back to the previous, and up again, and up again to the next one, please. Thanks. In summary, the proposed replacement dwelling would be of high quality, what the officers consider in terms of its material specification design. Whilst the design would be contemporary, it would respect traditional forms and proportions, would incorporate design features and materials which are appropriate for the conservation area. And remember, conservation officer has not objected, and the requirements of the town plan. So officers conclude that the previous refusal reasons have been overcome, and that the amended proposals would deliver a conservation gain relative certainly to the existing 1950s bungalow which you saw this morning. And detailed conditions would effectively control matters including the construction phase, material specifications, landscaping and drainage, and would ensure a safe and stable site. I know that the town council would rather that some of these matters were dealt with at this stage, but I think from an officer perspective, these conditions are fairly standard and can be submitted as further information to follow following any planning decision. So we're recommending approval subject to these conditions. Just one minor typo to mention, quite important one. The local member for the area, as stated at the end of the report, is of course Carolyn Bagnall and not Dan Thomas.
So
Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to double check that it is the local member is correct.
And Thomas is the local member.
Oh,
It is here.
I do beg your pardon. It must be the area of the thank you, Idris. That's very good news. Many apologies there. Thank you, Chair. That's all I wanted to.
Thank you, Jeff. Right, we're going to now get some speakers on this. We've got 4. We've got Alex Craig here. If you'd like to address the committee, sir, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, Alex Kaiser, local resident. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I've not had the opportunity to put our side forward before, and can I just say that there's some fake pictures what you've just gone through of my property, which are completely inaccurate. And that elevation there is completely inaccurate. I was born in Broseley Hospital. I've lived here all my life. I've lived in that house that was just on the last side for 21 years. Compare that to the applicant who's never lived in Broseley, has no intention of living in Broseley, wants to extract some money from Broseley and never be seen again. The impact on the neighbours, you saw it this morning, you did. The current bungalow is single storey, proposed one is 2 stories. Current bungalow has no windows on my side, the northeast. The proposed one has 8 windows. So we're going from 0 windows to 8 on my side, and I'm the closest property. They're currently over 3 metres from my boundary wall. The new one is less than 1.78 metres from the wall, which means you've now got to remove any foliage and barrier and put in some sort of retention wall beyond my wall, which is, you've seen it this morning, that's going to be impossible. The proposed building casts a shadow onto my house, complete loss of light, loss of privacy. I'll be looking directly into my patio, my kitchen, my lounge, my bedroom, blocking all our view of Bentham Woods. The build itself, I can't believe we're going to be satisfied with standard conditions because we've got a crystal ball here next door, plot 29, 17/01239 full. You passed it 5 years ago. It's still a derelict bomb site. Everything you put in place was ignored. Everything you said you would make sure didn't happen, did happen. Landslips, drainage, my walls damaged, leaks sprung, the road damaged. Where are the Shropshire Council now? I've been ringing you for 5 years. No one's answered my calls. The police don't want to know, environment don't want to know. That's a different applicant, but still messages are still closed. The new applicant is going to do repeating, same again. He's already showed no respect for the law. We've got photos of him parking 4 vehicles where he stood this morning. Bonfires, setting fire to his own property. I've got a video of that. Swearing and shouting and doing obscene gestures to our neighbours. I've got a video of that. Why do you think the outcome is going to be any different? What does Broseley need? A huge 500 grand house that's unaffordable for locals, which he wants to build, or a nicely refurbished bungalow for a starter family or old couple that he's just done up now. You've seen it this morning. It's a lovely property now. It's not a horrible 1950s property. He's done it up nicely. It's only about money. So what do you want to put first? Profit for someone to take away, or leave a nice house there now? The net result is one house people need and one house people don't need. I'll leave your choice up to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. And now goes to Councillor Ian West, speaking on behalf of the Parish Council. And you have 3 minutes to address the committee, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the committee members who came to the site visit earlier on today. As you've heard, this application is to build a new 2-storey dwelling to replace an existing bungalow, which the owners are currently renovating, as you just heard. This is located in a particularly important, sensitive part of Broseley's conservation area, the historic squatter settlement in Broseley Wood. This area is known as the Jitties. The name comes after the network of trapways across it that some of you explored on your way back. This existing bungalow is not something we would want to see built in this area today. It's not a thing of beauty, but it does have a number of advantages over what is proposed to replace it. Firstly, it's unobtrusive. Secondly, It does not affect the privacy of neighbouring properties or obstruct their right to light. But most importantly, it stood for several decades without threatening the stability of the surrounding area. We note that changes have been made to the application in response to Broseley Town Council's and other people's objections, but we consider these have not fully addressed the loss of privacy issue and done nothing to stop the overshadowing of the neighbouring property. However, our most serious concerns are about the wisdom of trying to build a new house in this location. This steeply sloping area is riddled with ancient mine workings and traversed by several underground streams. In 2017, consent was very unwisely given to building a new property on the site immediately up the hill from this proposal. After work started, ground stability problems were so severe that 2 ligages collapsed and had to be closed. Shropshire Council ordered emergency stabilisation work to prevent further ground movement, and my understanding is that that project has now been abandoned, and some of you will have seen we're left with an ugly empty site where that was going to be built. Broseley Town Council and local residents fear a repeat of this disaster if approval is given for this application. The access road to this site is only about 2 metres wide between walls, which severely limits the size of vehicles and plant that can be brought to site. This poses a challenge to even minor building work, let alone the major stabilisation work that will be required if an attempt is made to build a new, larger dwelling on the site. The officer's report talks about the risks to Shropshire Council if this application is refused, but no one seems to have considered the risks to the community if it is allowed to go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We now have the local member, Dan Thomas, and you have 3 minutes, Dan, to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, thank you for allowing this onto committee and allowing for me to speak on this critical application in my division. The original application in March 2021 was called in for committee consideration by my predecessor, but when it was recommended for refusal, he dropped the request. The original plans in March 2021 were for a 141 square metre footprint, an increase on the current footprint, which is 90 square metres. They state in the current plans that the footprint will be 121 square metres. This is still an increase of 36%, which is completely unacceptable for such a small site. Similarly, the plans will create a building that is far too tall for the site it is on. It will be significantly higher than the other properties around it and any other property on Sycamore Road. This will result in a loss of light and privacy for the next door neighbours, as well as those across the street. These are amongst the comments by Broseley Town Council, which I fully endorse. The area suffers landslips and flooding. The adjacent plot at number 29 is above. This site was starting to be built before the land slipped, causing PUSGT to be closed for 4 years. Bridge Road and other places in this immediate area have had landslips, making this area totally unsuitable for large dwellings to be built. In 2018, 3 families were evacuated in the area due to landslips. I know from personal experience that the narrowness of Sycamore Road is challenging to drive through. From your site visit, you will have seen the telegraph pole, walls, and even houses that have been scraped into by cars trying to get past. The access outlined in the past refusal has not been addressed. And even if they create more parking spaces, why haven't they already? Instead, my residents have faced verbal abuse from builders who are currently renovating the existing bungalow when they were kindly asked to move their vehicles so they could get out. Finally, the design and materials fail to meet the requirements of policies DS1 and DS2 of Broseley's Town Plan and the Emerging Neighbourhood Development Plan for Broseley. Broseley Wood is also within the Broseley Conservation Area due to its unique architectural and historical interest. Broseley Wood has a remarkable history and it needs protecting. The Broseley Neighbourhood Plan Policy HO3 states that no new development will be supported north of the junction of King Street, which includes Sycamore Road, because of the severe constraints on the road network. I fully support the more recent applications, such as rendering the current property, which will make for a pretty bungalow in keeping with Broseley Wood style and won't be too big. We have a chance to stop this needless overdevelopment, and I urge the committee to take it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Right, we've got the agencies joining us by Zoom. Mr. George Galuzzi.
Good afternoon.
So 3 minutes.
We have been supporting the planning and conservation requirements for over a year now. and we are confident that the proposed revised development is now in line with these requirements and will be a positive contribution to this area. We are very well aware of the sensitivities of any development in this area and the history of approvals on the adjacent site that turned out disastrous and caused much anxiety. Our client has kept engagement with all residents frequent via letters and/or face-to-face contact when possible, and will continue to do so. We have had discussions with neighbours that have raised concerns about maintaining access to family members that reside nearby, and modified the rear boundary wall proposals and access to the residential private proposals to take on board the concerns raised. Should this development be approved, our client will continue to seek the cooperation and support of the local community and do everything within its power to minimise the impact of any construction work, site traffic and parking by means of a site and deliveries management and traffic plan. The development will closely adhere to the conditions as laid out by planning. Our client wishes to thank the committee for their time and support and for all in the community that engaged with us.
Thank you. Do you want to come back, Graham, with anything?
Yeah, I think that there's I beg your pardon, a concern from the town council about a repeat of what's happened to property at the rear, where the jetties collapsed and the land is effectively undevelopable as it stands at the moment. I just wanted to highlight to members that there is a planning condition which requires prior ground investigation in appendix, and no development, no building will occur until the outcome of that has been identified, and that will require invasive excavation within the site, and the nature of any foundation will be determined based upon that particular issue.
Thank you, Dave. Right, now on the committee, please. Councillor Parsons, please.
I just wanted to ask a question. The local member mentioned that there is, I'm not sure if it was a neighbourhood plan for Broseley or what it was, that had outlined that there could be no further new developments beyond a particular road. I can't even remember what the name of that particular road was. Is there such a policy, and how does it sit with what we're trying to decide today?
Yes, it's referring to the Broseley Town Plan, which is sort of adopted by the parish. It isn't a neighbourhood plan. They are working on a neighbourhood plan, but it does have a raft of policies, and it has to conform with the development plan, which includes the current Sando plan and core strategy. And this site falls within the boundary of the town of Broseley, which is a key settlement. And it is a requirement or it is a facet of that policy for key settlements, CS2, CS4, I believe that development is appropriate and within the town boundaries of Broseley. So I think there may be sort of detailed policies relating to individual areas within Broseley, but the principle of a replacement dwelling within the town boundary of Broseley, which this is accepted by the overarching development plan policy for the area.
Thank you. Do you want to come back, Dave? Councillor Parsons? No. Councillor Tindall, please.
Yes, can I ask a question, Graham, please? No building work will commence, as I understand it, until a ground investigation has taken place. Are we, i.e. the committee, putting the cart before the horse in that we may give permission for something that actually won't be able to be built because of the ground conditions? If I was the owner of the site, even a speculative owner, I think I would have wanted to investigate ground conditions before submitting a planning application, because as we all know, Broseley has been heavily mined, and I just feel that this is slightly the wrong way around.
Yes, I know that's an understandable sentiment given what's happened on the block behind.
Yes,
what I would say though is that this condition requires comprehensive investigations, including invasive excavations within the site. I think we've got to bear in mind that this 1950s bungalow has been in place with no evidence of stability issues for 70 years, and that the proposal involves only marginally overprinting outside of that footprint. I think the other factors to bear in mind perhaps relate to drainage, and I think that there is the opportunity, given that there's a condition requiring surface drainage with SUDS compliance and other matters, to actually improve drainage within this site relative to the existing situation. Drainage and the infiltration of water is a key factor which determines stability on a hillside site such as this. So in actual fact, there may be the potential that this site could be further consolidated in terms of its stability, but we do have that detailed ground investigation to start with. Now, I think that had there been a realistic assessment from the coal authority that it might not have been possible to develop on this plot, then I don't think they would have recommended a condition. They would have required that there be investigations and they were subject to consideration before any decision. But the fact that they have accepted the principle of a condition here indicates that and it ought to be acceptable, and we're not looking to build significantly outside the existing footprint. Thank you.
Could I just add to that? Sorry, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Just to add to that, we regularly, as an authority, grant permission where it's possible that development might not take place for various reasons outside of the planning process. Be that land ownership issues. And if that's the case and it's not developable, then obviously this would have to be developed with that investigation having taken place and to meet the building regs, etc., etc. If it can't be done, then it just falls away after time. So there's no reason why you can't, as a committee and we as an authority can't grant permission at this stage.
Thank you.
Not after that.
Councillor Parsons, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This, a similar application to this was rejected on, I think, 3 grounds back in 2021. They were how the building would sit, the size of the building, how it would sit in the conservation area, its effect on amenity and neighbours, and on traffic grounds. And it was interesting to see the site today and also to talk through with the officer. And I believe that the developers have attempted to make some move in terms of the design of the property. They have looked to change the style of windows to make it more in keeping with the area concerned. I mean, but this is still a big development. It's 121, but on 2 floors as against 90 on 1 floor as it was previously. So it's a big development, and I don't think that all of the things that have been done to the design have changed, in particular the problem of overlooking the house that's to the left side of this property as you come to the front of the property. And those windows in the dormer windows in the roof will be very close to and will overlook the property on that left hand side. Now, I don't know whether there's been any consideration as to whether they might be frosted glass or whatever, but they do appear to still present a problem to that neighbour on the left hand side. And so I'm concerned about that, but I haven't made my mind up at this point in time, and I'll listen to the debate.
Thank you. Councillor Tindall, please.
Sorry, I don't wish to be taking out all this time, but I was one of the fairly few who actually visited the site this morning. I think, Tony, you're referring to what I think are roof lights rather than dormer windows, perhaps.
Yeah.
But anyway, be that as it may, I know the case officers said they've had another go at fenestration. I still don't terribly like it. I think the proposed southwest elevation is, it's not so cleverly contemporaneous, if that's the word, Chairman. But it's certainly not of sort of heritage standard. It seems to me a bit of a compromise between a modern building and something that respects the environment of this part of Broseley. So I'm not happy bunny about the fenestration.
Thank you. Any more speakers, please? Can we have a decision? Or?
Might ask the question, please. What you're calling roof lights, are they Velux windows? Because they are, they open, therefore people can open and look at various angles and various views. Do they open or do they not open?
Roof lights can open. I'm not sure that the plan actually makes it clear, but we can, they will provide a ventilation purpose here because they're in lieu of windows on a second floor, which is sort of complete accommodation, but we can control the extent of opening. If members wish to have a further fenestration condition to prevent overlooking by restricting the angle of opening. Additionally, for the two lower roof lights, which are visible on the top right plan there on the side adjacent to the boundary, I think they're probably bathroom lights anyway, but we can make them opaque to avoid that overlooking from there. The other lights are sort of higher elevation along the sort of within the roof line, and if we control the angle of opening of those windows, then there shouldn't be any material overlooking. So I would suggest, if members were concerned about the upfloor fenestration, that we give officers a delegation ability to tweak the wording of the fenestration condition in order to require opaque windows for the lower two roof lights and limited opening for the upper roof lights, if that would address overlooking concerns.
Thank you. Councillor Bunting, do you wish to comment?
Don't mind, I'm a substitute, it's my first go, so bear with me.
You're on the side with it this morning.
Yes, I really want to thank Broseley Town Council because they've gone to a lot of effort to produce a town plan, a design statement, to put forward very detailed comments, both in writing and in person. And my observation is this, that as we approach the new local plan for Shropshire, I know of lots of towns and parishes that are currently developing town plans and neighbourhood plans. And they're doing that because they want to shape the development in their areas. So I hope that today we will respect the very clear requests in the Broseley town plan. They talk about not adding additional load on the narrow streets of the town, about not having further development north of Sycamore Road, about not having a very specified size of properties and conservation gain in a conservation area. I think we have to be careful not to set a precedent today whereby we ignore or dismiss the very clear instructions in local developed plans and neighbourhood plans, because we are on the threshold of many local neighbourhood plans that will shape 30,000 homes going forward. So let's not set a precedent where those people think that that would not be a good use of their time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lumley, you're on the side. Did you wish to add anything? No. Councillor Love?
No.
No, nothing to add. Someone going to make the proposal then, please? No?
Chairman, I wasn't on the Councillor Hartett from Plan Division. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the site visit this morning, but I do know the area, having been there previously. I think perhaps on the one in 2017, which was not a success as it sounds. From what I can see of this particular building, I'm rather like Councillor Tyndall. I'm not entirely. I don't think he liked the design of it. I think there's been some attempts that have been made to try and make it fit in, but to my mind, it still doesn't really seem to shout out to me that it's going to be an asset to the area. So I still think that possibly it still might be contrary to paragraph 202 of the NPPF. So I'm just wondering whether to test the views of the committee, I'll propose that we refuse it.
Thank you. And that's your proposal is to the end petition in MPPF. Okay. I've got a second for that proposal, please, to refuse the application. Councillor Tyndall?
I think, may I add to it or not?
Yeah, you can add to it.
Just simply, I don't like the architecture of it. I agree with Councillor Nigel Harting with that. It's not correct for Broseley.
Thank you. Is there a chapter?
Can I just check? So, Councillor Harting is moving refusal on the grounds that the design is not appropriate to the location, essentially, and it's contrary to the MPPF and to, I presume, in that then you're including CS6 and MD2. If without wishing to kind of put words in your mouth, if that's correct, because obviously those are the policies that relate to design. So just to make that clear before you take the vote, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. Right, because proposal for a refusal, and it's seconded by Councillor Tyndall. I will ask Arthur to take the for or against, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For refusal, that is.
Yeah, for refusal. Sorry. Yeah.
Andy Buddington,
In favour.
so for refusal.
For refusal, yeah.
Julia Buckley,
For refusal.
Nigel Harting,
For.
Jeff Balmer,
For refusal.
Hilary Luff,
For.
Nigel Lomby, for Richard Marshall,
For.
Tony Parsons,
For.
Robert Tyndall,
For.
David Evans.
For.
Unanimous, Chair.
That's carried unanimously. The application is refused. Thank you. Right, we now move on to the second application of barn conversion at Rowan House, Gravels Bank, and installation. Tim, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just before I start on kind of introducing the application, I would draw members' attention to the late representation sheet. As you will see there are 3 late representations relating to this proposal. In addition, I would like to suggest or add to the recommendation in terms of the conditions. I was intending to request or require an additional condition that tied the ownership and management of the proposed holiday let units to the occupation of or to the ownership of Rowan House. That may be possible by condition. I think that it is possible by condition, but if not, it's possible that it may require a Section 106 agreement instead, and they require the applicant to sign a 106 agreement. So, with your discretion, Chair, I would like to propose that we be given, if the resolution is to grant planning permission, that officers be given delegated powers to either impose the condition or require an appropriate Section 106 agreement, which ties the ownership together.
Yeah, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, so the application itself relates to the conversion, and I say conversion in its loosest terms, because I'll come on to that shortly. The conversion of a Dutch barn into 2 holiday lets, with the remainder of the Dutch barn being used for purposes ancillary to the main dwelling, and it also includes the installation of a small treatment plant to serve the development. If I can ask you to move the slide on, please. So what you see there is outlined in blue the land ownership on the right hand side, the land ownership relating to Rowan House, and there's a red box in the middle of both of those plans, which contains the building and the land immediately around it, which is intended to include both the treatment plant and a small gravelled area with parking and turning for 2 vehicles. So the building on the left-hand side, the building is, as I say, is in that red square. You'll see there's 1 ash tree that's immediately adjacent to the building. You'll see there's also a tree to the left. to the west of that building, that's an oak tree, and then the property, Rowan House itself and the building are surrounded by other residential properties. If we could move on to the next slide, please, Tim. So that plan shows the proposal. So at the moment, the building essentially is an open-sided Dutch barn, so it's got a pitched roof on it. But other than that, it has a metal frame and is open-sided on all sides. The proposal is to create walls within the frame or inside the frame of the building, and then the details of that are set out in section 1 of the report before you. It involves the use of timber, and also it involves the provision of the car parking spaces and the supplementary planting to enhance the existing hedgerows around the site. As you'll see, the
photograph.
Yeah, I'll come on to it in a second. I'll show you a photograph in a second. The bit of the building that is intended to be holiday lets, and they're two very small kind of bed sit units, so they would only be suitable for a single person or a couple, are the part of the southern part of the building furthest from Rowan House itself. And the northern part of the building would be retained for ancillaries. If we can go to the last slide on Tim, please. I'll come back to these slides afterwards. That one. So you will see that's the extent of the building as it is at the minute, and that's why I said conversion in its loosest term. It's important for me to say at this stage that I don't think were this in a different location and were it not within a settlement, then I think that the recommendation would be different. But essentially what we have here, there is an existing building, but it is in a settlement, Gravels Bank, which is identified as being suitable for some new development, new residential development. So it's in a hub within the existing local plan. Okay, so that's important. It's clearly considered to be, through the adoption of the local plan, it's considered to be a sustainable location. And I think it's fair to say that even were there to be no building there, were this to be an application to put in a building which comprised of a small scale holiday let and garage, or ancillary accommodation for the house, then it's something that we would be supporting anyway. So in principle, officers don't have and can't, I don't think we could possibly justify a reason for refusing the application in terms of the principle of development. You will see that the application has been subject to quite a substantial amount of objection or comment from local people. Some of that relates to the kind of the principle of development, which, as I've already said, I hesitate to say we could justify any refusal on. That there are concerns about the impact on the AONB, but again, members need to bear in mind that there is an existing building there, and it is clearly within the settlement and surrounded by other existing properties. There can be concerns raised about the access and the highway access to the property and to the site, but again, our highways team have been consulted and have raised no objection on that basis. And bear in mind that, you know, we're talking about two very small units here, so the level of traffic to be generated by occupation of both units at the same time would not be considerable and wouldn't justify a significant impact on highway safety. I won't take you through each one, but you will see each of the consultee comments referred to in the report. There are no outstanding objections from any of the internal consultees. Some conditions have been recommended and are included in Appendix 1 to the report. But there are no outstanding objections from any of those statutory consultees. Also, the Environment Agency have been consulted. It's the intention is to retain the trees, and they've been the subject of an arboricultural assessment and a method statement, and it is feasible to retain those trees, which are important in terms of providing some screening to the development. If we could go back, Tim, sorry, to the, I think it's the second slide on this, and then I'll run through. You will see there that the proposals include, it includes a solar array of solar panels and openings, obviously, to serve the two proposed dwellings. You'll see that the units are very small, self-contained, kind of almost bed-sit units. For single person or maximum two-person occupancy. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought for a second. If we can go to the plan before, please, Tim. Sorry, the one before that. You'll see there on that plan the distance to, there is a distance specified from the existing building to the property to the northwest, and that distance is 51 metres. So there's a substantial distance, way above what you would expect in terms of distance between residential properties, and there's the distance to the nearest property to the immediately to the west of the site, which is Moss Barn, is somewhere over 30 metres. So there's the distances that you would expect between properties in terms of loss of privacy and amenity are exceeded. We normally work to a minimum distance of roughly around 20-21 metres between two-storey properties, and in this case, obviously, the converted property is single-storey in any case. So bear in mind there is existing hedgerow around the boundaries. Potential for the neighbours to put up fences if they so wish to maintain privacy, but officers are satisfied that there won't be any significant impact in terms of residential amenity or anything. I'll just run through the rest of the slides quickly. Tim, if you can move that forward. So these are that's the existing barn, as you've seen. You saw the picture. That probably makes it look, and that's the proposed the building once completed. Can move on. That's a building looking from, I don't know whether that's looking from the neighbour's property, but it's looking through obviously what is an existing hedgerow towards the building. As you can see, it's not particularly well screened because it's in winter at the minute, but obviously, that will be subject to vegetation. And as I've already said, the distances between buildings is actually much greater than you would, the minimums that we would require. We can move on to. I think that is looking towards the neighbouring property, but I'm not sure. I have to say, hand on heart, I'm not sure exactly where that's taken from. We can move on. That's the same photo, but taken it now. So it's identifying that there isn't any, although you can see into that building, you can't see in great detail, and I think this is taking the other side of the hedge because there is hedgerow along the boundary at that point. We can move on, please. Again, that's a picture looking towards the building from a neighbouring property. You can see the building in the roof of the corrugated roof of the building behind the trees and shrubs there. And that's it in terms of photographs. As I say, officers have considered all of the material considerations, those being the principle of the development, the impact of the proposal in terms of residential amenity, also the access and the intensification of the use of the access, which, as I've said, would be minimal, the possibility and the retention of the trees, which has been established, and the impact on the AONB. So the recommendation is that the application be approved, subject to the conditions set out at the end of the report in Appendix 1 and to, as I've said, to the imposition of an additional condition tying the ownership and management of the holiday lets to the existing property, be that by condition or, if necessary, as section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tim. Councillor Harding, please.
Yeah, just a couple of questions if I can, Chair. This sort of seems to me to be a definition perhaps of a building I wasn't even too aware of. It's more like a sort of a tin structure really, isn't it? A sort of metal structure which doesn't have any walls to it, doesn't shout to me as being a building of any sort. If that construction were not there, what would be the planning policy in terms of constructing a brand new building?
I don't think I think I said something at the start. I don't think the considerations would be any different, if I'm honest. As I say, Gravels Bank has been identified as a hub within the adopted local plan, and therefore, and obviously part of the building is intended for residential use anyway, ancillary to the building, which wouldn't be an issue. But the other part relates to very small scale holiday accommodation, and provided the other implications, the other material considerations are met, I think it's something that we would support, because that's what there are policies within the adopted plan that encourage the provision of new holiday accommodation.
Okay, that's fine. I think there is a typo in 616, I think, midway through, where it says small holiday. I'm assuming that means 2 small holiday lets.
616, is it?
61.6, yeah. Midway down. 2 holiday, small holiday.
Yes.
So it's typo, yeah. Also.
2 small holiday units.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Bollington, please.
Thank you, Chair. This strikes me, I mean, it's a tin shed. It's an area where there's a great demand for holiday lets. These are small. One of the late objections was about noise, but these are very small. They're not for hen parties or stag parties or other sorts of things, and they're really very small. And it does strike me that there's a good opportunity to create 2 holiday lets in an area, remove an ugly tin shed and a glider that appears to be in front of it.
It's a hangar.
It's
a hangar inside it, right? Okay, but we can remove that and create something that will actually enhance the NAB, because we need tourists, we need visitors, we need places to stay, and gravel is a good place to have them. So I support this fully.
Thank you. Councillor Tindall, please.
It would be remiss of me not to mention the colour of the roof, wouldn't it?
Yes. Very good.
If I could repeat my mantra, I haven't actually used this mantra for quite some months now, but I would think something like 18B29, it needs to be a dark blue-grey.
Well, the proposal actually says at 1.2, it says the corrugated metal cladding in the green colour.
Well, you know my views, Tim, on green in the countryside. It's the most unsympathetic hue. And I have in the past carried the committee with me on the question of coloured sheeting. If they don't say juniper green to me, I should melt.
Well, I'm sure the applicant isn't wedded to the use of green, and the condition proposed at condition 2 says the development should be carried out in strict accordance with the approved amending plans and drawings listed below. So if members were concerned about the use of green cladding for the roof, I think perhaps then we need to add a further conditions requiring the roofing materials to be agreed with officers, if that's acceptable to you.
It's perfectly acceptable to me.
What about chimney?
Well, I don't think there's a need for a chimney really, because they're quite small. I think they probably go up smoke.
Councillor Nigel, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm not going to talk about colour at all, I promise you. Now, with this application, I accept there's been many local objections to it. From reading through the objections on the planning portal, not many of those do appear to be material objections in the first instance. And when we look at it, it's certainly not a building conversion. And so for it to be classed as anything currently other than an eyesore, I think would be swinging it a little bit. As Councillor Boddington said, some of the late representation has talked about noise. I think with the size of the actual units, they're not going to be, you know, massive family lets. They're not, as you said, going to be any sort of party. So I don't think noise comes into it as a problem. And when we actually look at CS16, that clearly states that we seek to deliver quality and sustainable tourist development, I think this actually does suit it. I think to replace the shack with something that's actually constructed, that's going to bring money into the area through tourism, I think will be ticking the box of CS16 in itself. So I'm certainly minded to go with the officer's recommendation and accept it.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Parsons, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was interesting to read those late representations, particularly the one from the parish council that described what you see there as looking like urban Essex, Dagenham or Chelmsford or somewhere. It doesn't quite look like that. But there was one late representation from a neighbour that made the point about where the road met the main road, and there's been a number of accidents there. I just wondered whether that is the case or not, whether there are any sort of statistics on that.
Thank you.
I'm not aware of any, but as I say, we have consulted Highways as part of this proposal, and they haven't raised an issue with the use of the access or the access exiting onto that junction in the centre of the village. So I think what we can do is assume that they would be aware and would hopefully raise a concern were there to be an issue with that junction. Just to reiterate, I did say conversion loosely. The intention is to retain the frame of the building and incorporate that into the new building, but it will essentially be new walls and a new roof, obviously, on top of that frame. Thank you.
Councillor Buffy, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reinforce the comments about the sustainability. So although the late representations talk a lot about the lack of public transport and the worry that there'll be additional cars, I think it's really clear in 6.1.6 where the target for these low-cost single units are walkers, bikers and horse riders. So I think it's really welcome to have something that is lower cost, and it's really, we should encourage exactly this kind of low carbon accommodation. So I think it should reassure some of those objections.
Thank you. Anybody else to speak? Councillor Boddington.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's general agreement that we support this application. I'd like to propose that we support it with the extra condition that officers determine the colour of the roof in Robert Tyndall terms. And we know that is, you can specify it in BS, Robert, but basically it's the colour that's called raven.
Yes, it is, yes.
And so we don't wish that, and we delegate that to officers.
I think to tie it to a particular colour is probably unnecessary, but I hear what you say in terms of it being a neutral grey type colour or something.
Yes, we've been through this, perhaps not in your presence, perhaps even a couple of years ago, and I produced a document published by a local planning authority, I think somewhere in Yorkshire, where it gave a list of BS colours, hues that they like to see, and the 18B29 was one of their favourite ones. So we have specified 18B29 in the past, and so I would be reluctant to allow you to depart from that. Sorry, that was a joke.
Okay. Do you want to come back, Councillor Marshall? You second it or?
I'll second, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, Chair.
That's lovely. Yeah.
There was the additional condition that we need to put on that ties it to the
Yes,
ownership.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, that's what we were saying. Yeah, okay, that's fine with that.
Can I just,
Councillor Elman.
just one quick question. Are we taking any moves to retain the trees to protect them? It seems like the future screening and so on, is that something that we should think about? I am for this application, I think it's a very good idea, but I'd just like to
Okay.
protect the neighbours.
I'll get Tim to clarify that for you.
Thank you.
Keeping the trees, obviously.
I've got a feeling they were covered in this
Yeah,
report.
I think so.
There isn't
I'm
a-
sure they are, there's a tree there now, I think of it.
The intention is to retain the trees, because, and if I could direct you to condition 5, which requires work to be done in accordance with the arboricultural method statement in order to retain the trees. But there isn't any proposal, and condition 6 as well requires that the work is carried out in a way that protects the trees, but there isn't any intention that I'm aware of, and certainly the trees aren't subject to a TPO at the moment.
Is that worth considering or not, in your view?
I'm not a tree expert, but I'm more than happy to take it away from the meeting that we ask the arboriculturalist to consider whether a TPO would be appropriate in this. I mean, a TPO, as you will appreciate, doesn't totally protect the tree. It doesn't mean no work can be done to it or it won't be lost, but it
No,
does.
but it's stronger than the word intention.
Yes, it is.
I'd like to propose we do something to try and retain those trees to screen the site. And apart from that, I'm very happy to agree with everybody else and go with this one.
Sure.
Councillor Tindall?
Yeah, Tim, I couldn't quite remember whether you said it was in a conservation area, because if it is, they will be automatically equivalent to TPOs.
It's not in a conservation area, it is in the AONB, but that doesn't afford it any trees and protection.
I think it's worth asking questions.
Okay, right, we've got a proposal on the table by Councillor Boddington, we've got a second by Councillor Richard Marshall, to add the extra conditions in regarding ownership tied to the other property.
I think it needs to be, sorry Chair, I think it needs to be minuted that we actually ask about the TPO as well.
So, and we delegate that to officers with the provision of the TPO. So we've got a proposal and a second for that. I'll now ask you just to take the vote, please.
Vote Chair. If you please confirm whether you're for or against the proposal, which is to grant permission in accordance with the officer's recommendation. Andy Boddington?
For.
Julia Buckley?
For.
Nigel Harting?
For.
Jeff Alner? For. Hilary Luff?
For.
Nigel Dombey?
For.
Richard Marshall?
For.
Tony Parsons?
For.
Robert Tindall?
Or,
David Burns?
For. Thank you, that's unanimous. We now come to item 7, which is appeals and appeal decisions. Tim, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't intending to say very much other than you will see there that we have received 2 appeal decisions and notification of 2 new appeals to be progressed, but you will note that the appeal decisions are both dismissal of the appeals, so further success for us as an authority in that respect. One of the appeals was subject to an application for costs by the appellant, and that was similarly dismissed as well by the inspectorate. So pleasing outcomes on both of those, and hopefully that will continue for the 2 new appeals that are notified to you there.
Thank you. Right, the date of the next meeting is May the 3rd, Tuesday room at Shire Hall. As usual, I'd like to thank our officers for the dedicated work and reports. I'd like to thank all those who attended the site visit this morning, and thank you for turning up the committee, and wish you a safe journey home. Thank you.
Chairman.
Thank you, Chair.